Today, I want to talk to you about the art of mastering your skills.
Hi everyone, Robert Villanueva here over a buyer's home. And of course, as always, I'll see you at the top.
Now, what do I mean by the art of mastering your skills? In the art of mastering your skills, there is a language that we call the language of sales. Now, this is important. And the reason why this is important is it's a little bit different than your everyday language. Sure, we're speaking whatever language we're speaking, whether it be English, Spanish, Italian, French, whatever it is. Um, but in the language of sales, there's a certain technique that is involved when it comes time to selling. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the saying, selling is not telling. Okay. Now, selling is a series of questions, and we have to understand this because the series of questions that we ask leads to the results that we desire. Now, even in asking questions, sometimes we can ask questions incorrectly, inappropriately. Not lead us to the results that we desire. And what I mean by that is basically when we find ourselves asking questions, which I'll talk about in a little bit, can you, will you, is it okay, do you mind? And in most cases, those are what are called closed-ended questions. And in closed-ended questions, we usually get a yes or no response. Unfortunately, in the language of sales, the largest percentage of the time, we already know what the answer is going to end up being, and that's going to be no. And of course, that's not the answer that we want. So we want to pay close attention to the way that we're asking these questions. Now, as far as practice is concerned, as the old saying goes, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice is what makes perfect. Now, in that, what I want you to do, now here's where we get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. What I want you to do is I want you to write down your most common objections. And what I mean by that is your most common objections are going to be from your prospecting, your lead generation, everything you did last week, yesterday, this morning, whatever it may be. Write them down. Now, one of the things I always like to do is write down the objection and then just put a little tally mark how many times I would actually get that particular objection. Well, because of this, it would give me the opportunity to practice the objection that I would get the most. Now, this is important because there are so many variations to these objections that we get. You don't have to memorize all of them. In most cases, studies have found that most people in the art of sales are usually getting between 8 to 10 objections. Why? Excuse me. It's the way that we speak, our phonetically, the way we take down the path of our conversation with these people. And in that, we're going to most commonly get these objections. Now, number one is write them down. Number two is start to memorize the objection handlers. Now, as you go through in the memorization, at first, sure, you're going to stumble. You're probably going to screw up, 10, 50, 100 times, 250 times. But as long as you go back to the first thing we talked about, which perfect practice makes perfect, give yourself that opportunity. Write them down and start to practice that. Now, not only the practicing part of it, but we should be role playing. And in our role plays, we can do this engagement with the people that we're role playing with. And when we're role playing with these individuals, we can go ahead and talk about, not so much talk about, but basically just give the person the objection and see how they handle it. And usually what ends up happening is the person you role play as an example on Monday, you go, that was actually a pretty good handler. Then you role play with the person on Tuesday, you go, you know what? I like that one. And then on Wednesday, you go, oh my gosh, hands down, that is the absolute best objection handler. You go through day by day with different role play partners, and you start to find different objection handlers and ones that maybe you find that are a little bit more beneficial. One objection can have a variation to these objection handlers. These objection handlers can be 2, 3, 5, 10 different versions. And in that, I want you to go back to the things that we talked about, write them down. Number two is start to memorize the objection handler. And then number three is start to role play those most common objections. Now, in that role playing, when you're doing the most common objections, give yourself the opportunity to work on the ones that you've been getting the most. instead of working on ones that, you don't get quite often. I'll give you an example. So early on in my career, I worked for a larger company, name brand, and I did that for about 12 years. And in those 12 years, I never heard of your company. Well, because of this, I didn't work on it. I didn't have to work on it because who didn't know these companies? And then eventually I made the decision to leave those companies behind and start an independent company. And the very first independent was Robert Villanueva Real Estate. I would call people, hi, this is Robert. I'm calling from Robert Villanueva Real Estate. Huh? I've never even heard of your company. So guess what? Now I have to work on that. Okay, so those are things that I want you to pay close attention to. Now, here's my next thing is how often are you practicing? Now, the practicing, a lot of times what people end up doing when I'm coaching individuals and I ask them how many role play partners do you have? And they go, I got two, I have three, I have four. Well, for some people, that's all they role play. And that's the only thing that they work on in terms of their skills, meaning that the only time that they spend any energy, effort, time invested in bettering their skills is the 2 or 3 role plays in the week. It's not enough. It's just not enough. Now, here's what I'm going to recommend. There are certain things that you can do and do them on your own. One of them is how about spending some time on simply memorizing? I would invest at least 1 to 2 hours a day. I personally, when I started, I always like to give it about 4 to 6 hours a day. What are you talking about? Well, I would find specific times throughout the days where I would work on this. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd put my headphones on and I'd start to practice that 30 minutes, an hour. I'd go to the gym, I'd practice another 30 minutes, an hour. I'd drive on the way to the office, another 30 minutes or whatever that may be. And then I would actually be on the phone prospecting. And in between calls, guess what I was doing? Practicing. And then I would take my lunch and I'd practice some more. And then I'd have a break and I'd practice some more. And then after I would go through and I would look at what the day consisted of. And then guess what I would do? Practice some more. Some of you are role playing again, as I mentioned, 2 or 3 times a week. That's just not enough. Now, the next thing is, of course, writing scripts. You can do this. Now, writing a script, studies have found when you actually go through and you write, you speak them out, and you work on the internalization of them, you'll remember at a faster rate. So I'm going to encourage you to spend maybe 30 minutes, even an hour of writing a particular script down. Now, it doesn't have to be specific to objections. It could be anything that you want, but the investment of time is what I'm referring to. And in that 30 minutes to an hour, you can work on exactly that. Okay, so I want you to spend some time in terms of just simply writing it down. I never really liked writing too much. It's just not the thing for me. My mom always used to say, you know what, you should have been a doctor based on your penmanship. Sure. Well, the other thing we can do is, again, going back to, as we talked about, the role play. I recommend having 2 role plays a day, 5 days a week for a total of 10 role play partners. Oh my gosh, Robert, what are you talking about? How in the world do I fit into my schedule? Well, if you want to get better, you do. Now, ideally, you can have a morning role play, probably 7, 7:15, 7:30. Now, here's the thing, is you really only need about 7 to 10 minutes per person to go through and do a role play. So if I'm role playing with an individual, I go maybe 6, 7, 8 minutes, and then I get 1 to 2 minutes of critique. They go 6, 7, 8 minutes. I give them 1 to 2 minutes of critique. So I really only need about 20 minutes to actually do this. So it's really important we understand the efficiency behind this, because some of you are spending 30 to 45 minutes in your role play sessions. You don't have to do that. Now, the other part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is how about working on it in between your prospecting sessions? Think about this. This is one thing that I took tremendous pride in, because in most cases, when you're going through and you're prospecting, you're telephone prospecting, you're lead generating, you're knocking on doors, whatever it may be, over the course of 60 minutes, let's think about this. Over the course of 60 minutes, how much time are you investing in doing this? Which is talking, in conversation. I would say the absolute most 20 minutes. If you're lucky, 30 minutes. My question is, what are you doing with the other 30 to 40 minutes? Remember, In most cases, we should be prospecting 2 to 4 hours a day. Now, I don't care where you get your business from. I'm not talking about cold calling. I'm not talking about just simply calling expireds and for sale buyers. I don't care if you buy your business. This is a contact sport. And in order for you to be successful, you have to have a lot of conversations. So, in that, in between whatever it is that you're calling, contacting, following up on, work on your skills. Well, how do you do that? You could do it a couple of different ways. Number one is you can actually just have the script in front of you and just read it. It's not that hard. Number two is how about recording yourself? Now, in most cases, this is where I go a little bit off, but I'm going to show you some mastery to this. In most cases, scripts will take anywhere from 20 to about 40 seconds to record, literally just going through reading the script. Now, in that, let's say a script is about 30 seconds. Let's meet in the middle. And if that script is 30 seconds and I'm playing it at the speed of 1.5, I can listen to that exact same 30 seconds recorded script in about 20 seconds. Now, in that, over the course of 1 minute, that's 3 times. We already identified there's about 30 minutes every hour on the hour where we're not doing anything. I'm hoping you're not on social media. I'm hoping you're not in a position where you're attending to other things other than being focused on the task at hand. In those 30 minutes times 3, we're talking about 90 to 100 practiced sessions. Wait, we're not done. That's only 1 hour. Again, I talked about prospecting, lead generating for 2 to 4 hours. And if you're doing this, even 2 hours, as you can see, I've practiced that script 200 times just simply over the course of just 2 hours of prospecting. I'm not adding time to your schedule. All I'm doing is taking the time we already have accounted for, but being more efficient, not just being effective. So that's another way to actually add opportunity in terms of working on and investing, of course, on your skills. Now, let's talk about another topic. What I want you to do, I would always role play. I suggest, highly recommend all of my coaching clients to role play for about 90 days. What do I mean by that? You get a role play partner, Joe, Sarah. Hey, any chance we can role play? Awesome. Joe, I got you on Monday. Sarah, I have you on Tuesday. Well, hey guys, I usually only partner up with individuals for about 90 days. I'm going to give you a cheat code to this. Okay. Now, please take no offense. And if you do, so be it. Okay. Now, why would I do 90 days? The reason I would do 90 days is because you know how this works. You get people that don't show up late, constantly giving you excuses. They're just not as good as you thought that they were. They're naysayers. They drain your energy. Well, I fulfill my commitment of 90 days and then I just move on. Or I absolutely hit a home run. And when I hit that home run, I find out that, Sarah's amazing. She shows up on time. She's always ready. She, working on constant things, the constant evaluation, great at giving feedback. And then Joe doesn't show up quite as often. So I'll just simply tell Sarah, hey, you know what? As far as the 90 days is concerned, I really want to keep you. I think you're a great role play partner. I really want to go as infinite as we possibly can. I've had the good fortune of role playing with some people for even 2, 3, even 4 years because of what I just described. Now, this is important because you want to constantly evaluate your role play partners. A couple of different perspectives. I'm not just talking about how much business they do. I've role played with people that actually do over 100 deals, 200 deals a year, and they suck. They don't show up on time. They're, calling every other week off. They always have an excuse. They're not on script. All of these things. And then I have another person that's doing 10, 15, 20 deals a year on time, ready to go, full of energy. They're constantly working on the things that they want to. Now, in this, I want to constantly evaluate and upgrade my role play partners. And eventually, you might initially say, well, Robert, I only have 2 role play partners. That's okay. You at least have a starting point. Go get a third, a fourth, a seventh, an eighth, and then we know what happens. You go and get that eighth person, that eight becomes seven, the seven becomes six, the six becomes five, and then you go back and get more role play partners. Now it becomes six, it becomes seven, it becomes eight, and then you lose one, and now you're at seven, and then you get another one, eight, nine, and it's this constant back and forth. Eventually, you will find yourself in a position where you will have a good roster of role play partners. Okay. Now, don't be too big for your britches when it comes time to this. Okay. And what I mean by that is that sometimes there are some people that are not really good in terms of their skill, but they do show up on time. Okay. Now, for me, I always followed this 80-20 rule. As an example, if I had 10 role play partners, eight of them, ideally, they're as good, if not better than me. I always want people to bring me up. But I would always do, one or two people where I would help them. That's kind of me giving back. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy being a coach. So I'm going to encourage you to look at continuing to, and this is infinite, as long as you're in this business, even now, 25 years right now, as I'm recording this, I role play with people that are been in the business for 15, 20, 25, 30 years, and they're still working on their skills. Okay. So I want you to constantly look at the upgrading of your role play partners. Now let's talk about how to role play. Yeah, I'm talking about how to role play. Now, this is important because you got to stop with the stupid versions. Okay. You get these, you go through and you start throwing these random objections. You start talking about things that people don't bring up, or that one time you got like 7 months ago and you're still trying to figure it out. Move on. Work on the calls that are most recent. And ideally, the calls that you're working on most recent is going to be the one that you came so close to setting that appointment, but you didn't. They hung up on you. Or you did set an appointment, but they ghosted you. So then you have to find yourself in a position. What do I have to do to get on the other side of that? And continue to work on that. Now, another thing, how to role play. Stop with the chit chat. Okay. I get recordings of role play sessions and I just hear, hey, Johnny, how's it going? Hey, how was your weekend? What'd you end up doing? That's not what we're here for. Okay. You could do that after. After you work on, excuse me, after you work on the role play. And if you have a few extra minutes and you're, on time, no problem. Chit chat for a minute, two or three, but get to the point, move on. Another thing I want you to do is I want you to prepare your role play partner. And what I mean by that, in preparing your role play partner, people that I'm role playing with at the moment, I'll say things along the line of, hey, Dan, do me a favor. I want you to pay close attention to making sure you can hear me smile. Okay. I unfortunately have always had this a little bit more stern, a little more direct, demeanor to this thing. And unfortunately, sometimes it shows up in the conversation. As the saying goes, I can hear you smile. So I would sit there and ask, for example, hey, Dan, do me a favor. Just make sure that I am coming across, welcoming. I do have that smile in my tone. So I would basically prepare them so that way, after the role play is done, I can go back and say, hey, how did I do, by the way? Hey, you know what? You did a really good job. That was way better than last week. That's how you want to be able to give critique. Now, the other thing is show up on time. Okay, this is probably the most disrespectful thing. I've always been a person that is really strict on my schedule. I've always been the kind of person that has respected other people in a sense and their time. And the worst thing that you can do in terms of being disrespectful is showing up. Your role play session is at 7:30 and you show up at 7:38 just because. That person that was waiting for you, now they're frustrated, they're agitated. Oh, man, Robert is always late. Robert this, Robert that. Well, it doesn't help you, it doesn't help them. So make sure you show up on time. Another thing is keep your ego in check. I don't care who you are. We always need to work on getting better. Okay. Now, if you're working with somebody that is just kind of draining you in terms of the over critique and just being a little bit obnoxious, well, maybe you can, again, going back to what I talked about, you can prepare them. Hey, do me a favor. I really appreciate that feedback, but can I get you to pay attention to this? because we've all had that role play partner or two or five or 10 where they're just a little too critical. And then you ask them, hey, how many deals did you get from them? I haven't gotten any. Well, you kind of have to take the critique with a grain of salt. Another thing is in regards to the feedback. If you don't know how to give feedback, just take some of the things that I just talked about. Hey, Joe, what do you want me to pay attention today? Okay. What are some things you're working on that I can, make sure that I keep a close eye on? One of the things that doesn't help is when you're done with role playing, at least for me, I really never like this, is I would go through and I'd role play and I'd get the, hey, Robert, wow, that was awesome. Good job. Well, cool. Kudos. Thank you so much for the compliment, but what can I work on? No, you're good, man. I really appreciate it. Great job. I'll talk to you next week. Mm, well, I really want you to pay attention because I do feel dismissed at that point. So be the kind of person that is constantly working on your ability to critique because that is really important. All right, now let's move on. Now, here's another thing. I talked earlier about recording yourself. What I want you to do is have a library of all of your scripts. And what I want you to do is I want you to record the perfect script. Go through, I think it's Tiger Woods that actually would practice 100 times on making a 3-foot putt. And if he went through and on putt number 99, he missed that putt, guess what he would do? He would start all over again. I want you to take a very similar approach. But in this case, you don't have to putt 100 times. You don't have to record yourself 100 times. Just do it once. But I want you to do it as perfect as you think you can do it. Because in that, you're now going to go through and listen to yourself over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And when you record yourself and it's not quite perfect, you know what I'm talking about, that little hiccup, all of a sudden it gets kind of ingrained in your head. The when do you plan on moving? And then all of a sudden you get the when do you plan on moving? And you just keep doing that over and over and over and over and over again. Well, that doesn't help. So if you catch that, re-record yourself. Now, I'm going to encourage you, especially if you're working on a specific script, is I want you to re-record yourself once a week. Why once a week? Well, the thing is that this week's version ideally should be better than last week's version. And last week's version should be better than the week previous to that. Even if you're growing at 1% week after week after week after week, you're practicing a better and stronger version based on what I just talked about. Now, you don't want to sit there and record yourself and then 6 months later, you're still working on the same version. Because ideally, you've role played 6 months worth. Ideally, you've listened to yourself thousands of times. Ideally, you've used the script when you've prospected. And then from that, you, of course, get better and better. Now, what I also want you to do is in that, I want you to pay attention to when you record your sessions, your prospecting sessions. In your prospecting sessions, we all have mannerisms. Some are not that big of a deal. Others are kind of a big deal. I'll use myself as an example as a low light. One of the things that I would do is I would be pretty decent on the scripts. I would do a pretty good job of repeating. I would do a pretty good job of affirming. The problem though is that I kept using the same affirming word. I would use things like cool, that's awesome, that's great. So just imagine when somebody sits there, how about yourself? When are you planning on moving? Oh, we're not. Oh, you're not. Cool. Well, how long have you lived here? Well, we've been here for about 12 years. 12 years, cool. Where'd you move from? Oh, we moved from LA. From LA, cool. Nah, it's not cool. So you want to look for, again, I'm talking about the recording of your prospecting sessions. Go through and critique yourself. Any good athlete, any good singer, any good actor, actress, it's going to go back and watch their film or watch their recordings. What could I have done better? And that's what I want you to do. Okay. So I want you to also invest some time on going through and, watching film, as you call it, or go back and watch your recordings is basically with what I'm getting at. I want to talk about the art and the language of sales. I want you to pay close attention to when you're asking questions, because again, remember, selling is not telling. And when you're asking questions, as I mentioned earlier, how often are you using the words can you, will you, is it okay, do you mind? Because again, these are closed-ended questions. They're going to almost always lead to a yes or no response. And that yes or no response, the largest percentage of the time, 80, 90, 95, 98% of the time, it's going to be a no. We put ourselves in that corner and then we don't know how to get out. I want you to use the words who, write this down, what, when, where, why, how, and if. Sure, how and if can be yes or no type questions. The key though is that you want to constantly pay attention to this. I'm going to give you a little example. This is the mastery of it. Let's use the just, excuse me. I don't know where this cough is coming from. Let's use the just listed script. And in the just listed script, the very first question is, how about yourself? When are you planning on moving? When you use that line, when are you planning on moving? They can't give you a yes or no. However, I'll hear recordings, listen to recordings, and I'll hear the version of, hey, how about yourself? You thinking about selling? Are you thinking about selling? What's that going to give us? A yes or no response. And then when I'm going through and I'm critiquing my coaching clients, well, I did ask them if they're thinking about selling. Yeah, but you're asking a yes or no question. So just the subtlety of changing the word from who, what, when, where, why to can you, will you, is it okay, do you mind? It becomes a different conversation. And if you get a no, 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 click. Ideally, you're going to work on some of these things, who, what, when, where, why. Here's the other benefit that I haven't shared with you. The other benefit is that who, what, when, where, why leads to questions in most cases about motivation. And everybody knows it's all about them, the consumers. And we always want to talk about them, their motivation, their desires, their wants, their needs. Because when you ask questions, can you, will you, is it okay, do you mind? All of those type of questions, it almost always becomes more factual and less about motivation. There's a saying that goes, logic makes them think, where emotion makes them act. When we get them to think based on our questions, we don't want them thinking more. They already do enough thinking. We want them acting more. And when we get them to act, it's going to be based on an emotional question. What's the benefit of making this move? Why is this move so important? Who is actually most looking forward to making this move? As you can see, I can't get a yes or no response. Now, what I also want you to do is let's talk about a rotation. And as far as a rotation is concerned, pick one script. I don't care what script it is. The listing presentation, the expired FISBO, just listed, just sold, PCCOI, all of these different scripts. Pick one and work on that for an entire month. Yeah, go deep. And everything that I just, in a sense, talked about is going to put you in a position where ideally you're going to get more and more results. Now, I also want you to work on 2 objection handlers per week. So let me repeat that. So 1, basically prospecting script a month, so 1 a month. And then the second one that I want you to work on is 2 objection handlers a week. So you're going to rotate them a little bit faster. Okay, so that way you at least have a plan of attack in regards to how you're going to do this. Now, don't worry too much about it, because again, we're going to be in this business long term. And if you're sitting there saying, well, I'm not going to work on that script until 4 or 5 or 6 months from now, that's okay. Because you're going to work on whatever that script is, and of course, prioritize it. Which is the one that gets you the most results, or which is the one that you want to get better results, and work on it from that direction. Now, what I also want you to do is practice closing. The art of closing, it's different. And what I mean by it's different is there's a lot of times where people go through, hey, so when should I follow up with you? In 2 months? Okay, yeah, no problem. I'll check back with you in 2 months. You have to work on the art of closing. Now, I'm going to give you a quick little tip because that's a different video in regards to the art of closing. Whatever objection, pay attention, whatever objection that they give you, use that objection for the purpose of a close. Whatever objection they give you, use that for the purpose of a close. Right now, in the market that we're in, it's very common for people to sit there and say, I'm just going to wait until after the holidays. I'm just going to wait for the market to come down. I'm just going to wait for the interest rates to come down. And what I mean by using whatever objection you get for the purpose of a close is, let's say, for example, they say, I want to wait until the interest rates come down. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I can truly appreciate the fact that you want to wait until the interest rates come down. What I want to do is I want to be able to compare the notes and share with you the advantages of doing it now versus waiting until the interest rates. By the way, are you familiar? No, I don't know what you're talking about. That's exactly why we need to get together so that I can share with you. Should I come by today at 5 o'clock or would tomorrow at 5 o'clock work better? Do you see what I'm talking about? Again, we're going to go into the depthness of this with what I just did in a different video, but I want you to work on the practicing of closing. And as far as the closing is concerned, I want you to I want you to play what I call is the penny game. And the penny game is you basically get 5 pennies. And in the penny game, every close, you're going to remove one of the pennies. Close, you're going to close again, you're going to close again, you're going to close again, you're going to close again. Or you can move pennies from top to bottom, top to bottom. Each penny represents a close. Now, why am I saying this? Because a lot of you, unfortunately, what you'll do is you close one time. You think it's a powerful close, and it's not really a powerful close. It's kind of like a, hey, so what do you think? Should we get together? Oh, yeah, you're right. We should just wait on it. Yeah, the market is definitely not the right time. I'll check back with you in 2 months. That's not really a strong close. So in that, there's a couple of different variations to with what I just talked about. One of them is using with what they talked about and use it for the purpose of the close. Another one is what I call as a passive aggressive close. Okay. And a passive aggressive close is basically just agreeing with them and whatever it is that they say. Okay. You're absolutely right. I mean, the market is definitely not the right time for most people. However, what I want to do is I want to be in a position to see if there is a possibility of it making sense. And we won't know that until we get together. Should I stop by today at 5 or should I stop by tomorrow at 5 o'clock? Okay. So in this, I want you to take away from everything we just talked about today is how to work on your skills. The people that actually have the skills pay the bills. The people that don't have the skills, unfortunately, they struggle in this business. And they end up being the agents that unfortunately get passive business. They wait for the phone to ring. They'll do the open houses. I'm not saying that's bad, but they'll do the open houses. They go buy business. They do all of these things. And it just kind of makes your business go like this. 1 month you close 2 deals and then you don't close anything for 3 months and then you're panicking. When you actually have skills, it's going to give you the opportunity to be able to maneuver in and out of conversations. I'm going to give you one more example and I'm going to just go ahead and wrap it up with this. I was a really big door knocker. And when I would go and door knock, I would knock on a door. And every once in a while, as an example, I'd go and knock on a just listed home. Knock on the door. Hi, my name is Robert. I'm with blank blank realty. And the reason I stopped by is I just listed a property for sale, blah, 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 blah. And then the person would sit there and say, oh, wow. Yeah, we were trying to get our property sold like about 2 months ago. Unfortunately, it didn't sell. Well, guess what? Now I have to move over to the expired script. Okay, well, tell me, where were you guys planning on moving to? How soon were you wanting to be there? Share with me. What were some of the, things you liked about your agent and all of these other questions? And all of a sudden, boom, the person says, well, you know what, Robert, we are actually going to go back on the market, but we're thinking about trying it ourselves. So I literally went to go knock on the door on a just listed, then turned it over to an expired conversation, and then finished with a for sale by owner conversation. So that's the advantage of being full versed in the language of sales. Hopefully that was helpful. As always, please share this with all of your comrades, all your friends, and anybody else that actually, if you found value in this, I'm going to encourage you, please subscribe, please comment, please like. And again, of course, as always, like I mentioned, go ahead and share this. And as always, I will see you at the top.
Hi everyone, Robert Villanueva here. Over a buyer's consult. And of course, as always, I'll see you at the top.